If I could just sell 401ks and get paid an asset under management fee for those 401ks, I would be worth tens of millions of dollars more today than I am. But when I realized it was deferring tax, not saving tax, when I realized that there were fees that were impacting the return substantially, when I realized that taxes could go up in the future and people are delaying their taxes so they can end up in an adverse tax situation, when I realized there's no cash flow with these plans and the tax savings that they think they have it isn't in their pocket, it's deferred in the plan that they eventually have to pay tax on, I started to be like, wow, this isn't what it was supposed to be. And yet 75 million Americans rely on that as part of their retirement plan. When there's not consistent cash flow coming in, or you're not sure where the next dollars are coming in, that could be a heavily concerning time that can disrupt your health, because it's more like a chronic stress that runs in the background on a regular basis. Like, it's not easy. Like, when there's tech issues before a performance, it could be really draining and exhausting. And when Mondays are my days where I just do all my business meetings, and a couple of those meetings are with attorneys, and I'm dealing with contracts that I normally used to have a partner that dealt with that kind of stuff. So when it lands on my plate, I feel like I'm really intelligent when it comes to certain things, and where I don't feel as intelligent. Like, legalese is not my expertise, and definitely not Hollywood legalese. And so I've been, like, working on copywriting my comedy special and work on a deal for distribution. And it becomes taxing, between that and then also attorneys getting involved and messing with my clients in a way that's outside of their zone of genius and their boundaries, because they're starting to make financial advice and they're not financial advisors. It starts to wear me down. Like, I like to have some days off, but because I took a longer period of time off to hunt, I took a longer period of time off to go to Burning Man, and I also launched a book at the same time, those types of things really impact me. So how do I handle that? One is, I was tired this morning, but I did get up and do the sauna. Just 20 minutes, get a little sweat on. Then I take a cold shower and I get into the cold plunge. The cold plunge definitely wakes me up. I definitely dip my face in there when I feel like I'm lack of sleep or stress, that my face is more likely to be puffy because of the inflammation that comes with that stress. And I feel that helps me kind of release it. Then I do like 20 minutes of stretching. And so that's kind of my first hour of the day, is taking time to stretch. I'm in the cold plunge, and to distract myself, I'm answering YouTube comments, which this week have been overly negative. Like, not a lot of people, just people that go watch like 10 videos and they're negative on every single one. And I'm like, yeah, like, it usually doesn't bother me at all. I laugh about it. I usually make fun of myself. But starting the day that way is helpful. And then writing, like, what am I grateful for? What's the intent of the day? And what are the things I want to reinforce that are most important to me, so I remember who I am and what I stand for and what's really going on. So starting the days that way could be, extraordinarily helpful. If I could just eat meat, then it would be fine. I'm just like, when I'm stressed, like yesterday, I ate so much candy, it was just a breakdown emotionally. Like, after having the barometric pressure drop while I was in Toronto, all my sinus pressure went to the front of my face. I wanted to record some of my audiobook, but I sound stuffed up right now. So, like, that kind of impacted me. I was in a lot of airports that had a lot of delays, and I had to end up sitting in middle seat on one of these planes. And, like, these are privileged problems I get, but they just weigh down on my psyche. So I got to make sure, am I working out? I didn't quite eat properly, so what could I do to kind of deal with that? Well, intermittent fast, I'm going to get back on track. So today I had eggs and meat for breakfast, and what I'm finding is, like, what I would love to do is just go get some nicotine. I don't smoke, but you could take nicotine sprays, you could take, Hoppe. Like, I feel myself wanting to go for that because of the unease and the pain, but then I just have to realize, like, pain is part of the gift. It brings up the emotions that might be unprocessed. I felt a little bit sad this week. I feel best when I'm talking about these things, when I write about in Money Unmasked. But the thing is, I'm a human being that still has emotions and still has struggles, like coming home late on a Sunday, my energy was kind of depleted because I didn't have my normal routines where I might go for a walk with Carrie, or I might, get my workouts in, or I get my sauna and my cold plunge, or get my stretches in. Sometimes being on the road disrupts that. Plus, I drank the one night when I was in Vegas, and that disrupted my sleep. And so there's kind of this compounded effect of selling a business and then having a small business that has big opportunity and trying to keep up with that. So how do I deal with it is maybe go outside and walk barefoot and get a little bit of grounding and earthing that way. Drink more water. get more sleep if at all possible. Like I've been going to bed a little bit earlier, but I'm also waking up a little bit earlier, and I'm trying to get myself to go back to sleep or at least meditate. And so I'm kind of working that, but it doesn't always cooperate, right? Movement. Right, that stretching. I mean, it comes down to a lot of the basics that we've always learned all along: what we eat, what we drink, how much sleep we get, how much movement we have, and if we can just basically be out in the sun so we get some vitamin D. I'm thinking I have less vitamin D right now because I haven't been out in the sun, haven't had my shirt off out in the sun because the weather's gone down, and I'm not taking any vitamin D supplement. So it could be a compounded effect of all those things, but just because I write a book about money that has a lot to do about prosperity and feeling abundant doesn't mean that I don't have bouts of scarcity. That doesn't mean that I don't get off track. It's just I get on track a lot faster. Like in the past, I would be in these ebbs and flows where I would be in such a flow state for months at a time, being so crazy productive. And then I would finally hit a wall because I was pushing too hard, or I wasn't creating that depth and harmony where I was taking time for relaxation, rejuvenation, get up to my cabin, because I'm trying to fit it all in. And that's kind of what happened after coming back from hunting is like from September 11th until today, I don't know that I've really had a day off. I am going to go to a concert on Saturday. I am going to take the day off with my wife and my sister and her husband on Sunday and just hang out at the cabin, which I think is much needed. But I find my old habits of being a striver where I think that work will solve all the problems. But if work leads to exhaustion or creates a deficiency in our health, or it starts to create like a level of grouchiness or disconnection because I don't feel like talking, which I normally like to talk things out, like I just find myself at a place where I have to course correct. You either course correct or you get forced into corrections. Forced corrections are surgeries, they're health breakdowns, they're organ failure, they're loss of relationships. There's fatigue that goes beyond where you just you start to lose a sense of hope. And so it has to be course correction along the way, which means creating a little bit of space, which means redefining timelines, which means recalculating priorities, which means designing a life that you don't want to retire from and examining the game that we're playing. And I'm saying in my game, what is it that I need to reduce and do less of? And part of it was just finding out what my flow is, how I create content so it doesn't take as much time, but how do I do that and still create the same amount of quality? How do I change some of the timelines for my book launch so I'm not overly stressed and constrained that I don't have time to take off and hang out with my son or whatever it might be? I can't think of another time, but it was just I had a meeting that went long. And by the time I got down there and I'm thinking about my next meeting I just wasn't in a place that I could handle. I couldn't be really present. Part of it is when you have a big vision, things get messy. I'm relying on independent contractors. I'm relying on other people keeping their word. And if it's more than what I can handle and be a steward over, then I have to look and re-examine, am I pushing the accelerator too hard? Am I expecting too much of other people? Am I being too nice and just lack of management? I need to be firm and loving, but at the same time create better parameters and guardrails. And so that's part of it. Is like sometimes I have to ask myself, why does it matter? Who really cares? Like, I think a lot of people, like I have a lot of knowledge to share, especially around this topic of money, and a lot of it's unique. I don't see it out there any other place. So there's a bit of stewardship there that also can feel like a burden, but I have to also recognize it's my job to live a great life first and foremost. It's my job to take care of my family first and foremost. And then I can bring that information to the world. But if I skip the step of taking care of myself and my health, and I skip the step of my family, then what ends up showing up in my life is guilt and shame. And guilt and shame is a burden that weighs down energy and doesn't allow me to be fully expressed. And then everything feels like effort. And I think a lot of people are forcing themselves and feel like they're an effort because that's what society wants them to believe. Sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. Sacrifice today because one day it'll all be better. Live a crappy life because one day you'll get to retire. This guy that's fighting with me on YouTube, like, I don't even know who he is. He's retired at 55. Like, that's not an inspiring life. Great, you're retired at 55. You have a long life to live and you're just done with value creation. Like, you can't find a purpose that serves other people and solves problems and adds value. Like, we just don't share the values. So let him live his life the way he lives it, but also examine my life and say, what do I have to change and course correct so it doesn't become a bigger problem long term? Look, I've been a very curious person that always questions everything. Not because I'm a skeptic, but because I want to know how things work and how effective they are and how it came to be. And I learned this really from being indoctrinated as a kid of how things were by going to school. Like, here's an indoctrination. America's the best, America, right? Like, And then I went to Korea and I was like, wait, these people are just as free as we are in South Korea, and they're very nice people. Like, so I do think America's an amazing place. Like, I think I'm really glad that I live here. But at the same time, like, I started to question because I went to this movie in Korea and they showed this thing called aircon disease, where this woman was using the air conditioner and then she got really sick. And when she turned it off and used the fan, then she wasn't sick anymore. But there were rolling blackouts because they were having energy issues. So was it really that people are getting sick from using an air conditioner, or was it they wanted people to reduce their energy usage, and fear was the way that they wanted to do it? And so I thought, well, where are we being told this? Like, for the first time, right? So I came home and I just didn't take anything at face value. I was going to school and I was like, I think that we lead better lives the better questions we ask. And I have a mentor that just got pancreatic cancer. They wanted to do chemo. He said no, left the hospital, even though they were advising him against it. And his numbers are now normal 2 months later. I just saw him in Dallas. It was super heavy, but he did other methodologies and, really asked so many questions. And the medical establishment, the people he talked to, were mad he was asking the questions. He's like, wait, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trained to ask questions. And so I just have asked a lot of questions over the years about how things work and what would prevent them from working and why they are the way they are. And it's very inconvenient for people, especially, in money, because when you ask and you learn, you find out that it's not what it seems. And look, some of the news was bad news for me. If I could just sell 401ks and get paid an asset under management fee for those 401ks, I would be worth tens of millions of dollars more today than I am. But when I realized it was deferring tax, not saving tax, when I realized that there were fees that were impacting the return substantially, when I realized that taxes could go up in the future and people are delaying their taxes so they can end up in an adverse tax situation, when I realized there's no cash flow with these plans and the tax savings that they think they have it isn't in their pocket, it's deferred in the plan that they eventually have to pay tax on, I started to be like, wow, this isn't what it was supposed to be. And yet 75 million Americans rely on that as part of their retirement plan. And then I started saying, well, why are we retiring? And I'm like, well, the industrial age, people had terrible jobs. Retirement was needed because people were working 7 days a week in assembly lines, and it was exhausting, and it was breaking their body down, and they would retire, and then they would only live for a couple of years because they had such a terrible life. We've had advancements in technology. We've moved to a more informational age and a more technological age, and yet we're still abiding by these old, antiquated concepts. And unfortunately, as you know, people are living longer today, but sicker and longer, dependent upon pills to keep them alive, dependent upon help from other people because they're not healthy and vital, their vitality is low. And yet they're going to live their so-called golden ages by doing the things they never did while they were growing up or while they were at work, because that's when it's supposed to get better. So I just started to ask questions. It wasn't like I wanted these answers. It wasn't like I arrived to an answer and then I said, how do I design a plan that supports and validates my process? Because that wasn't the case. There's just much easier ways to make money than how I make money. It's harder to write a book and make money from writing a book than selling a financial product. And my wife used to say, too bad you couldn't just stick to selling insurance where there were renewals and it was easy for you to do, but I was also bored. So now I'm moving into is there a way to still be an intellectual property capitalist and be able to have organizations that I can get paid when people actually get services done the proper way? And so I'm just playing a different game now because it would help for recurring revenue and it would help to make sure it's designed properly. And as long as I don't hit bandwidth or too much, capacity issues, I'm just looking at it's all or nothing. I either do this or I do that. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from, so go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.